Hi, my name is Staley Temple, and I'm a senior psychology major at UNCW. And with being a psychology major, I'm exposed to a lot of different individuals on the LGBTQ plus community. So I was wondering have you ever faced any adversity with students finding out about your faith and being involved in the LGBTQ plus community? If that's ever impacted the dynamic of your teaching, or if they've ever expressed discomfort in that, and wondering how to navigate that. Thank you.
Hey friends, welcome to Meet the Prof. I am Shane Hartley, and my friend Spence Hackney and I, we have this core conviction that of all the problems college students face, the root problem is their lack of a saving knowledge of Jesus. And so we have a great privilege of interviewing Christian professors with the goal of encouraging Christ-centered conversations between professors and students on the college campus. So we take questions like you just heard, and we will ask them to professors. And a free resource that we have available to you at all times is there are over 500 Christian professors who have put their profile and some of their Christian testimony on meettheprof.com. So you can go there, and if you are looking for a certain campus, you can do a search by campus. You can do a search by the whole state, and you can do a search just by name if there's a certain professor you're looking for. And if you're a professor, we would love to have you on there if you would like to share about your relationship with Jesus. So I am so thankful for this time to get to connect with you. I'm really feeling thankful for a lot of things. I am grateful for a friend like Spence who can do a podcast like this together with me, and there's nothing like doing it with a buddy like him. I'm grateful for many hard lessons through 32 years on staff with Crew and counting, the first 16 with students and the last 16 with Crew with professors. And I'm so grateful now for these professors who are willing to be interviewed and want to have conversations with students about Jesus. And I'm especially grateful for you. Thank you for listening. You are here right now listening to us. And we know some of you are college students, and the rest of you are people who love college students. So you may be professors, you may be parents or even grandparents of college students. And I'm so grateful for all your input. You've given us a lot of encouragement, and thanks for replying to my emails and giving me comments. We welcome any more, and you can find us and chat with us at any time on Instagram. So it's Meet the Prof with Shane and Spence, and we'd love to connect with you there. And so I'm very grateful that now you're going to get to hear from Irene Hatsu. And Irene is an associate professor of human nutrition at the Ohio State University. And we have a privilege of asking several things. One is the very challenging question about LGBTQ plus issues on campus. And I think you'll be encouraged how she answers that with her desire to approach students as a whole person. She also shares about what she's learned in resiliency, especially coming from Ghana and moving to the United States. And I get to ask my burning question to a nutrition professor about celery. Does it really burn more calories than it gives? So we cover that and a lot more serious, helpful information. And before we get started, would you please remember to subscribe or follow on whatever app you're listening to this now? They have different buttons for it, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you're on YouTube. If you are listening to this on one of the podcasts and you'd like to see the video of it, we have them all, the videos recorded on YouTube. So you'll find us on YouTube, Meet the Prof with Shane and Spence. And so now, without any further ado, here's our interview with Irene Hatsu.
Hey, Irene, thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Prof. Appreciate you being here.
I'm glad to be here.
How's it going at The Ohio State University today?
It is going well at The Ohio State University. It just happens to be a time of extreme heat. in
Oh,
the Midwest. Other than that, it is going great.
well, where we live, it's always extreme heat and 100% humidity. So I have no mercy on you in Ohio. I'm just going to say that. But I do have a burning question. Whenever I meet somebody from the Ohio State University, you've got to tell the audience what's the deal with the in Ohio State University. Why do they call it that?
I think there are so many OSUs.
Okay.
And if I understand it correctly, it is patented. And so that's why they have to use it. And it separates like Ohio State University, say from like Oregon State, Oklahoma State. But I could be wrong. But that's what I heard.
He's just asking because he wants me to call him the Spence Hackney.
I'm going to start calling myself that in the third person, I think. But if you call it Ohio State University, you'll get corrected by an Ohio State fan. They'll be like, no, it's the Ohio State University.
Ohio State University. I've been at Ohio State for 12 years, going on 12 years now. That's what I heard.
Oh, that's great.
So, Irene, I have another burning question. This one's a real serious one. For you as a nutrition professor, is celery truly a 0-calorie food or one that you burn calories eating, or is that just a myth?
So I have heard that, and I think that came about from like one study several years ago. And while there is some truth to that, I think we typically don't eat celery by itself.
Yeah.
Almost always eat celery with dipping it into something or in a soup or something. So as much as it is a low calorie food, that is true. Because we eat it with other stuff, we have to consider the calories and the other things too. So yes, it is a vegetable. It's healthy. You can eat it as a part of a low calorie diet to boost health. But because you are typically eating it with a dip and stuff like that, I wouldn't say it is low calorie.
I always eat celery with peanut butter.
Negative calorie.
So if I eat celery in both hands with peanut butter, does that make it a balanced diet?
It is balanced in a way. I mean, you have your protein from the peanut butter, you would have some carbohydrate, and you have fat. So yeah. It is balanced in a way.
I always add stuff to celery. You're exactly right.
But you're right. Celery has no taste. That's the problem. There's no flavor to it.
You've got to put something on.
And that's why it takes the flavor from the whatever you are dipping into, like the peanut butter. But the peanut butter is very high calorie. So if you have a ton of peanut butter, that negates all in terms of calories, it is negating everything that you will gain from the celery.
Yeah. All right.
That makes sense.
So here's a related, deep spiritual question. Okay, so we're going to get theological right away. Why did God make everything that is high calorie taste super good? Like, why didn't he make ice cream taste terrible?
Ice cream is man-made, not God-made. God made the milk.
Okay. You actually have an answer for this. This is great.
God made the beet and the sugar cane, and we decided to convert it into sugar.
Okay.
And so I would say the ones that God made, the one that comes straight from the earth, I don't know if they are necessarily that sweet to make us eat it like crazy, like the way we do when we eat things that we manufacture, like things that we change.
That's a really good answer. I'm a little offended you have that answer because now
you should be offended you didn't know where ice cream comes from.
Yeah,
it's true. I've kind of been off the sugar lately. I've been trying, I've been kind of trying to kick the habit, and now an apple tastes like a piece of candy. So when I eat an apple now, it's so sweet I can hardly stand it.
And that is how God created sweetness, like an apple, a fruit, not the extreme sweetness that we get from like ice cream and all the other sugary stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. I've learned something. I've taken it away. Thank you for that.
Well, Irene, we ask all the professors this of what is an embarrassing moment you had when you were a college student?
Oh, so when I was an undergrad, I was a pre-med. And we had to do a lot of dissecting of animals. And the first time I had to go through that, actually, the first couple of times I went through a bit of fainting spells, and that was very embarrassing.
Oh, yeah.
For me. I mean, I ended up not going to medical school for like I knew that was not for me. After those classes, I knew that was not for me. But
Did you faint and fall down?
Not necessarily, but
Good.
I don't think I completely passed out. No, but I had some, where I had to be held and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I get it. I had a bad situation. I dated this girl who was a nutritionist in college, and she took me to go see her cat that she was dissecting or something. We went in this freezer, and there was like cats and sandwich bags on the wall. And she tries to pull hers out, and the wall of frozen cats starts sliding off onto me. It's like the stuff of horror movies.
It's a nightmare.
Like, I can see not wanting to ever be a med student after something like that happens. Because I didn't want to date her after that. Like, I don't.
Yeah, for me, that is when I realized maybe I can still stay in health, but I needed to stay away from courses or careers where they have to cut people and things up. So,
well, there is not much that changes people's lives more than good nutrition, too. Like, what you do makes an enormous difference because it like prevents the need for a lot of healthcare if you can just eat right.
That's right. That's right. You are what you eat from head to bottom.
Wow.
Well, Irene, on meettheprof.com, so we're going to ask some serious questions to you. I loved how vulnerable you were on meettheprof.com, and you were sharing how you, growing up, dealt with the wanting to please people as well as pleasing God, which I can really relate to as a people pleaser. So you shared in there a story of a senior class president lovingly confronting you with your conflicting desires here. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about that and why was that so influential for him to talk with you?
So I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church. I grew up in a home where there was never going to be a Sunday where you would be like, I'm not going to church. I'm staying at home. That was not going to happen. So I knew the Lord. I went to Sunday school. I learned about Jesus and what he had done for us. But what I was missing was a personal relationship. So I had the head knowledge, but there was nothing relationship wise that was personal until I went to high school. And when that confrontation happened, and it was a loving confrontation, it was just like being pulled aside and being asked, do you think your life is actually pleasing the Lord, and stuff like that. That led me to realize that I do have a head knowledge. I know about God, but that's where it ended. And so with that turnaround, I was able to seek him more. That led to a personal walk and a personal relationship. So I felt like that was a turning point going from, okay, I know about God. I call myself a Christian. I go to church. I worship at church, but when I come home, that's it. It was like a Sunday church, and it didn't go from Monday through Saturday. It was only like a Sunday thing. So that is why I consider that a turning point, because it allowed me, it opened my eyes to the fact that I was missing a personal relationship with God.
How have you seen yourself get out of that habit of trying to please people as you've grown closer to God? How has he helped you with that?
So I have to remind myself that God is not human. And that God's expectations are different than man's expectations, and this actually freeing. Now, the fact that I know that now doesn't necessarily mean that I don't fall into the trap of still trying to please people or still thinking that I can do something to make God like me better. So it is a daily walk. And when I am reminded of who he is daily, it allows me to pivot in an environment where I think I'm doing something. I get myself caught up in I'm doing this so that I can be liked more. I'm doing this so that I can achieve favor. I'm doing this so that God will say good job, kind of thing. I think the personal walk allows me to be daily reminded of the fact that He's not human, that He loves me unconditionally. There is nothing I can do more or less to be loved more. So
You said something really profound there. You said God is not human and he has different expectations than human expectations for me. I want to make sure we camp on that. That's huge.
And it is very easy for us to, and that is how I lived my life for a long time. The expectations my earthly father had of me, I transferred that to God. So it's
Yeah.
like I related with him that way. Even after I had a personal relationship, I still related with him as if I had to do more, as if what he had done for me was not enough. So for me, it is always, I have to remind myself that God has done it all. Jesus has achieved it. Anything that I do is not to make him love me more. It is, I'm doing it out of love for him and obedience. It is not for him to love me or do anything better for
Yeah.
me.
You know, those thought patterns about your parents' expectations affecting your expectations of God. In my experience, it takes years to work those out.
Yeah.
Was that yours too?
It is still my experience, like I said,
Yeah.
and being in academia, I feel like I constantly have to get myself out of that because there's so many expectations anywhere you pass with a lot, and we do the same with our students with benchmarks. And this is not to say that as the like don't study hard, don't do hard work, but you just do your best and you leave it at that. And I don't know how, like, I don't know how to put it. We should have an audience of one, and God is that audience. So whether when I'm everything I do, I should do it as if unto God and leave it at that, because the extra, I feel like it's man's effort, and that can, you can get very quickly into a downward spiral that can lead to being burnt out and having negative emotions towards God, that
Yeah.
He is not even the source of the things that are going on in your life that
Yeah.
makes you have those emotions.
So, to most of our listeners are either students or parents of students, typically. What advice do you have for a student that's moving from living under their parents' expectations to moving to college where the parents' expectations are a little different and they need to start to learn to substitute that parent that's always around for God's expectations on my life? And I need to learn to live for God, because that's the point where a lot of students abandon the faith, I think, is, they had parents' expectations. They have a head knowledge of Christ. They come to college, parents aren't around, expectations aren't there. And then the head knowledge never gets to the heart like it did with you. Like, so what advice do you have for parents and students on how to navigate that transition?
So I will start with the parents. I would say the fact that your student is removed from you does not mean you still do not have some kind of influence.
Great.
And the
Okay.
influence can come in like calling them weekly or however often you to pray with them, check on them, still be that avenue for them, that support system for them, because it will still need it even if they are far away. One thing that I did, and I think it was really beneficial to me, and it wasn't on purpose, it was just the Lord's doing, where he ordered my steps that way, is that in college I got myself involved in a Christian group, a Christian youth group, and I had a lot of support for people who are like-minded like me. We did a lot. We immersed ourselves in worship. We immersed ourselves in doing life together, godly ways, and we had accountability with each other. We allowed ourselves to be accountable to each other. And to be honest with you, I'm probably going to date myself a little bit, but 25, almost 30 years down the road, those people are still really good friends today,
That's
that we still
great.
pray together.
Really?
often, and still accountable to each other. We will call each other up and ask them how life is going, and try to have that accountability, because your parent may not be there, but you have people who God can use in your life. And so long as you are truthful with them and they are to you, and you have that open, accountable relationship, I think the Lord can use it to his glory, and you can come out unscathed from a college campus.
That takes a lot of work to keep up those relationships for that long. That's a
It
real
does.
sacrifice.
It does, but I think it's just because we did life together. Like, you were roommates, you eat lunch, like we pretty much did a lot together. One of, not just one, but I would give one example. One of my college friends from the youth group, the Christian group, he's a missionary now. And he is a missionary in Africa, but he was in the US last year. And he came all the way when I think he was in North Carolina, actually,
Okay.
Right.
visiting. He got a car, drove here. He and his wife drove here for us to fellowship, and pretty much it was just like 24 hours, and he went back.
I love that.
But we tried to still keep each other, to keep that friendship and that accountability going.
That says a lot.
That's beautiful. You know what strikes me? You've got a really unique perspective because you've seen Christianity in Africa and Ghana. You've seen Christianity in Georgia, which is pretty different. And then you're in Ohio. So you've seen three pretty different cultures and how Christianity plays out. What have you learned from just that distinction as you've moved from place to place?
I've even moved more than that.
Okay.
But I think in Ghana it was a little bit easier and also it was also a different era of life. I feel like
Oh, true.
even in Ghana now might be different than 25 years ago, 30 years ago. But in Ghana, Christianity is, or being religious, even if you're not a Christian, is the norm, or is very common. And so acting out your faith, it's not considered, like nobody's going to question you or anything like that. And you would have, the environment allows you to be free. In Georgia, and are you talking about the US, correct?
That's right.
Not the country. Okay.
That's
Yes, in
right.
Georgia. And prior to living in Georgia, I had lived in California, which is a little different.
Well, that's another country. Like, it's a completely different.
In Georgia, the South, I feel like it's still a little freer. Maybe not as free as Ghana, but I was able to live out my faith on a college campus, and
Yeah.
I did a lot of midweek service with college students, and honestly did not. But this is still 20 years ago. So, and it didn't feel constraining, or I didn't feel like I was out of the norm, even on the University of Georgia campus. And then I moved to Florida before coming into Ohio, and this was still this. I guess I have just always, everywhere I go, I just find a Christian community and then just jump right in.
Yeah.
In Florida, not necessarily, but I still didn't feel like it was a little bit constraining that I couldn't express myself and my faith. I mean, granted, being a student is different than being faculty.
Sure.
So, but as a student, I felt free. I could speak to. I identified as a Christian, and
Sure.
I lived that way.
I think every professor we talk to at some point has underscored the need for community. And you started and ended with that in what you just said.
Yes, community.
I find it very interesting.
It is a way to survive.
Yeah.
Because I think that is how you are emboldened. Because in community, you don't feel like it. You are just an N of one. And so when you are in community, you feel bold. You are able to stand up for your values. And I also think community gives you checks and balances too for what you believe in.
How are you able to experience community there on your campus? Do you have any kind of a gathering with other Christian faculty?
We used to before COVID. Through we call it the Thompson's Institute. Is an affiliate of Crew. And I still think there are a couple of Christian faculty groups, but we are not able to meet weekly or monthly, or once in a while we'll get something done. But the way I experience community is, again, I am blessed to have a group of core friends that are Christians and are also faculty, and I do life with them.
That's wonderful.
So I have like 4 or 5 people around me that are Christians and are also faculty. So I do life with them on campus
Yeah.
that way.
I love you use the word accountability, and that you don't hear that very much. But in Christianity, in my own relationship with God, accountability has been huge. And I know that a lot of faculty have different opinions and different feelings or even fears of how much they can talk to their students about their own faith, the professor's faith. And sometimes I've heard that accountability with other professors has really given some encouragement and even some boldness to simply say, on the first day of class, say, one thing you can know about me is that I'm a Christian. So I was wondering if you can share with us, like, how are you able to share with your students anything about your faith? How are you able to have any kind of a discussion about Jesus?
So I personally I don't do it too often, overtly sharing my faith with my students. But what I do tell my students, even at the beginning of the semester and throughout the semester, is that I am someone who is a follower of Jesus, and the way I relate to them is because of the values that I have as a Christian and having that relationship with God. And that is how I interact with them. And so I do my best to be a good ambassador, even of Christ in my classroom and even with my colleagues without saying anything, without overtly saying anything. And one example that I had a couple of years ago with a colleague, which I didn't even realize that she was watching me or she took anything that I said, or she listens to things that I say, is one day we were at a meeting and then she used profanity and she turned to me and she was like, Irene, I have to apologize to you. You're a Christian and I shouldn't have said that. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, like, I wasn't even thinking that, but that told me that they were watching and listening, even without me overtly saying anything. Another faculty member going through a difficult time one day knocked on my door and said, can I ask you to pray about something for me? And then shared with me. I didn't pray with him there. I just told him, yes, I would pray with you. I will pray about the situation that you've shared with me. And I have had students come. I think I use words and also say things in class that point to being a believer. And so I've had students come to me and just straight out ask, are you a Christian? I can sense. And then I say yes. And then they get all excited. And then we sit down and have conversations. I've done mission trips with students. Because of that, they've joined me on trips with Crew.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I don't overtly try to, preach to them or anything,
Sure.
but I use my interactions with them and the fact that I am an ambassador. And so everything that I do and say is pointing to God. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and God just uses that to make connections.
That's amazing. It struck me too that you're making yourself accountable to your students when you're telling them that you're a Christian and this is going to affect the way I teach. And your
And
colleagues,
then
even you're really making yourself accountable, not to be perfect, but just to be faithful. So
one feedback though that I've gotten is that they tell me how strict I am.
really,
But at the end of the semester, almost without fail, I get a letter from one student that tells me, "Thank you for being hard on us."
really,
Because I tell them that I know you can do it, and so excuses, I don't easily accept excuses. And they're like, if you had not pushed me, I wouldn't have done it. And so thank you for
Oh,
pushing
that's
me, and
great.
thank you for being strict. So
Yeah.
it's like a coach, a good coach.
pretty much, yeah.
You've challenged me to remember that people are paying attention to how I live, even when I don't think they're paying attention. And that's part of being an ambassador, is when you're out in public as the ambassador for the United States and Japan, people are paying attention to you and are forming an opinion about the United States based on how you act.
Exactly.
And
And I honestly was not thinking that my colleague was watching or even, but then and because I don't think I had ever said anything to her about being a Christian or being a believer. But she used profanity, and as soon as she did that, she turned to me and she was like, "I have to apologize to you." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, I shouldn't say that in front of you. You're a Christian." I'm like, "Okay."
Well, after talking to you for half an hour, I have no doubt that you're a great ambassador for Christ, because you can sense the Holy Spirit and you seem like just kind and full of goodness in life. So thanks for being an ambassador
Well,
there at
thanks
The
be
Ohio State University.
well, thanks be to God. I don't know if I do such a good job, but I'm human, and yeah, I try to do my best. One thing I try to, which is, I think one thing I have with the Lord is obedience. If I hear it, if you tell me, I will try to be obedient. So I guess that has brought me this far.
Well, we don't come up with all the questions on our own. We take some questions from college students. So take a listen to this question from a college student named Staley.
Hi, my name is Staley Temple, and I'm a senior psychology major at UNCW. And with being a psychology major, I'm exposed to a lot of different individuals on the LGBTQ plus community. So I was wondering that, have you ever faced any adversity with students finding out about your faith and being involved in the LGBTQ plus community, if that's ever impacted the dynamic of your teaching, or if they've ever expressed discomfort in that, and wondering how to navigate that? Thank you.
So my answer to Staley would be that's Staley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that I have personally never had that a contentious or anything with the LGBTQ a student who identifies that way, because when I interact with my students, I typically tell them that I see them as a whole person, more than a sexual person. They were fearfully and wonderfully made by God, uniquely, with so many values, with personality. There is so much to them than to just focus on their sexuality. So I try to relate to them as a whole person. And a lot of times people allow you to relate to them wholly once they realize that you see them as a whole person and you want to love and relate with them as a whole person. So I think that approach of seeing people as a whole person rather than just one aspect of who they are has taken away that any barriers that might be created with me being identifying as a Christian faculty, because I want to see them for who God created them to be, and that is definitely more than their sexuality.
That's helpful.
And courageous. That was a great answer and a tough question. I love the idea of relating to the whole person. Like, here, I'm going to pick on myself from a nutritionist standpoint, right? So I go through times where I eat too much food and I make poor choices. The Bible calls that gluttony, right? And I treat my body poorly, and it says it's a temple. But that's not all of who I am.
That is not all of who you are.
Yeah.
And absolutely, that is not all of who you are. And you are not doing it from January 1st at 6 a.m. all the way through December
Yeah.
31st at
Yeah.
midnight. You are human. And so it is just a tiny portion of you.
Right.
And yeah.
Right.
So.
All right.
Well, we have some lightning round questions for you. This is because we have so many questions we don't have time for. We decided we're going to slam them in like lightning. So, all right, the first question is, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were 18 years old?
Be like, Irene, relax. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything extra for God to love you. Mm-hmm. He loves you anyways, and just be free and live in Him and let Him guide your life.
We've actually heard that answer a few times too. I think there must be something about a college professor who drives himself really hard and needs to hear that. So that's great. How about a senior getting ready to graduate and enter the real world?
I would tell them what I tell my students, my grad students, is that hard work still pays.
Hard work still pays. Okay.
Hard work still pays. The society today would tell you that you don't have to work hard, but hard work still pays. And so, whilst you are not doing it for to kill yourself, also do not treat life and the opportunities that you are given lackadaisically. Value those and then work hard at your goals.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying that famous John Piper line of "Don't waste your life."
Yes.
Title of his book.
It's great.
Don't. Well, I'm not going to say what I was going to give an example of, because when I talk to kids nowadays, they all want to do one job. And I'm like, that is not the only job. Like, there are so many other things. But I'm not going to talk about that one job, because I feel like it is a new thing. Everybody wants to be an influencer. Like,
Okay.
That was my guess, was influencer.
It's good you're being careful because we try not to edit stuff out. So we would want to keep everything in, just even what you said. What advice would you give another Christian professor who's wanting to have an influence on his campus?
Be true to who you are and pay attention to the Holy Spirit, because He does speak and He does guide, and He does guide you to what He wants you to do on the campus where He has placed you as an ambassador.
What do you mean by the first part of be aware of who you are?
Be true to who you are. Don't hide the fact that you are a believer. Don't hide the fact that you're a Christian. Christianity and believing in Christ is not something to be shy of, or, oh my gosh, I don't want people to know. No, be true to who you are. That is who God has called you to be, and He's placed you there for a reason. So be true to that.
Okay.
That's fantastic. All right. So I'm a parent of one college student, another one getting there. What do you tell us parents about dealing with Christian college students in particular? We hope they're Christian college students.
So is a question that you want the kids to go to Christian college? Or
Well, no. Like, what advice do you have for me as a parent who's sending a kid off to college? And you hope, maybe they're a Christian, or you hope they keep their faith, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that is tough. But I think I would encourage the parents to realize that God still does have a remnant. There was a time in Israel when everything had gone downhill, and you wouldn't even think that God's people were still around. But God's people, He still had prophets in there. He had remnants in there. So God still has a remnant on the college campuses in terms of faculty. They might just be a few, but God still has them there. I know that I pray for my students. And I know of other Christian faculty who pray for their students. So just trust God that He would take care of your child and will continue to keep him. The Bible says that whatever we entrust to God, He keeps, and He will keep your child well, even on college campuses. And who knows, You bring that one friend that would be an accountability person, somebody to encourage them through the college experience. And the most important of all, keep praying for them.
Yeah, that's great.
For that, because prayer works and God answers prayer.
That's a good word. It helps me remember we only need a handful of good Christians. It doesn't matter that there's 5,000 great Christians around them. You know, you mentioned I've got these 5 great friends, which I do life with.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's true. There's probably a remnant at every campus except for Duke University. Like, I just can't imagine.
We're going to have to get a
Should we edit that out?
Now.
I'm joking. You can probably edit that out later, I guess. I'm going to make you do some editing work. I went to the University of North Carolina, so I tried to get a little Duke stab at some point.
I do know people. I do know people there. So there's a remnant there.
All right. Yeah, well, there must be 2 then, because I know 1 too. There's two Christians.
Actually, it is. She was a student. It was my when I was having my PhD. When I was going through my PhD, one of my grad student colleagues is her daughter. She was a missionary there for a couple of years.
Okay.
Well, I've got one last question. What would you say to a student who's a Christian student and is struggling to decide about a career, and they are feeling like the most holy careers that would please God the most would be if they were a pastor or a missionary, work for a Christian nonprofit, but their gifts are in, some other kind of skill. They would be drawn to, other kind of careers. What would you say to that struggle?
I'll tell them God gave them that skill for a purpose, and He wants to use that skill at another place that the pastor cannot reach that person. And so to absolutely run with it, wherever their passion is and their skill is, to go do it, and the Lord would use it, and He would use them in that environment that He is going to place them. So pastors and missionaries cannot reach all people. There would be somebody in the financial market. There would be somebody in an academic meeting. There would be somebody on the boardroom who would never hear a missionary, would never hear a pastor, but they would see them and they would hear them. And in that boardroom, they can be an ambassador for Christ. So they do not have to just walk in a particular career to be able to glorify God. God can and will use them anywhere He places them.
You've encouraged me today. I feel like I'm going to go and take the hill right now. Thank you for this. If nobody else hears this, I'm a better man because you've spoken. So thank you for spending time with us.
And you've learned something, that God didn't make ice cream.
But Breyer's vanilla ice cream, I think He might have, because it's vanilla bean.
How about middle ground? God made man and gave man the idea or the mind to make ice cream. So indirectly, He made ice cream.
Well, but by that argument, He also made methamphetamines. I just want to point that out. So we got to be really careful.
God made guns, God made knives. They are useful for certain things.
Right.
And so man chooses to use them for bad things.
Set them straight, Irene. Set them straight.
Yeah. I feel like you're my mom, Irene. I feel like you should parent me somehow.
Even though you're older than
I might need this.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Irene, thank you so much for this time. It's great to meet you, and super thankful that you are there in these students' lives at The Ohio State University. So thank you.
I'm glad I was able to have this. We're able to chat. Thanks for having me.
Well, isn't Irene fun? I think she was such a good sport with Spence and I. So grateful for that time to get to interview her. And please feel the freedom to reach out to her. She has given permission for you to email her, and I will put her email address in the notes of the podcast you can find easily. And remember that you can read more about Irene and other Christian professors on meettheprof.com, a great free resource. And especially if you are a college student or you know of a college student, maybe even starting school soon, you can encourage them to look up professors on their campus that may be on that website. And we need a lot more professors on there. We have 500 plus right now, and we would like to have a lot more. So I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for taking this time to listen. Thanks for listening here till the very end. And if you please would remember to subscribe or follow on whatever app you're listening to this on. And until next time, please pray with us that God will encourage more Christ-centered conversations on the college campus.